Parker's biggest weigh-in so far is 25 ounces.
30, 32, 35.
Something happened behind the scenes of Gold Rush that viewers were never supposed to hear about. It started quietly, almost like background noise on a remote mining site, but within days it would explode into one of the most intense hidden feuds the show had ever seen. And while the cameras captured the usual tough days and stubborn machines, the real story was unfolding far from the public eye, in whispered conversations, broken agreements, and one confrontation that nearly shut the whole operation down. No one expected the first spark to come from something as simple as territory. Two teams were working closer than usual this season, forced together by shrinking opportunities and unpredictable ground. At first, everyone tried to stay civil, but the uneasiness was already there. Rumors began circulating that one crew felt the other had crossed an invisible boundary. They weren't fighting over piles of dirt, they were fighting over the promise of gold hidden beneath it. And in Gold Rush, that promise can break friendships faster than a malfunctioning excavator. The tension grew after a deal that was never officially documented. It wasn't in writing, and it wasn't approved by producers. It was the kind of gentleman's agreement miners traditionally rely on. We stay on our side, you stay on yours, and we both get through the season. But when one team shifted their equipment a few yards past the imagined line, the other saw it as a betrayal. Suddenly, the uneasy smiles disappeared. Conversations shortened. People avoided eye contact. For a show known for its massive operations and dramatic rescues, the real drama was happening in the quiet spaces in between. Then came the shutdown. One morning, a machine that had been running perfectly the day before suddenly refused to start. At first, everyone blamed the cold, then the fuel, then the wiring. But when the second machine stalled a few hours later, whispers turned into accusations. Had someone tampered with the equipment? No one wanted to say it out loud, but the idea spread through the camp like wildfire. These weren't ordinary malfunctions. The timing was too perfect, and the impact too disruptive. To some, it looked like someone was sending a message. The confrontation didn't happen during the day, when cameras and crew members were everywhere. It took place late at night, long after the lights were off and the production vehicles had left the site. A handful of workers met near the equipment sheds, their voices rising sharply in the freezing dark. They weren't arguing about who worked harder or who deserved more screen time. They were accusing each other of stepping over lines, breaking trust, and risking everyone's season. By the time producers heard what had happened, the damage was already done. People who once shared tools and meals no longer wanted to stand on the same ground. All of this came during one of the toughest seasons Gold Rush had seen in years. The ground was stubborn, the weather unpredictable, and gold totals were far below expectations. Every decision mattered, every mistake cost money. When the pressure rises like that, even the smallest disagreements can turn volcanic. And this time, the pressure pushed both teams to their limits. Viewers watching at home sensed something was different. The smiles looked tighter, the jokes felt forced, but no one realized just how fragile the relationships on site had become. Behind the scenes, producers were facing their own challenge. They knew something serious was brewing, but they didn't want the show to look like a recording of workplace drama. At first, they tried to keep the conflict off camera. They hoped it would cool down as the season went on. But when the nighttime confrontation happened, and when one of the most important machines stayed silent for nearly an entire day, they could no longer pretend everything was fine. Internal discussions started about whether the feud should become part of the storyline, not because they wanted drama, but because ignoring it was becoming impossible. What really shocked everyone, though, was what happened next. One of the teams quietly started discussing a split from the production entirely. They believed they could start a new operation, with new partners, away from the show's eyes, and away from the people they no longer trusted. The idea wasn't just a rumor. It was a real plan with real consequences, and if it had gone through, it could have changed Gold Rush permanently. Teams leaving the show isn't unheard of, but when they leave because of internal conflict, the entire dynamic shifts. Even now, long after the season wrapped, traces of the feud remain. People who once relied on each other no longer speak. The nighttime confrontation is never mentioned on camera, but those who were there say it was one of the most intense moments in their mining careers. And the rumors about the equipment shutdown? They've never been confirmed, but they've also never disappeared. In the end, the most revealing part of the whole situation wasn't the fight itself. It was how close the show came to losing one of its key teams, and how little the audience knew about the chaos unfolding behind the scenes. Gold Rush has always been about man versus nature, but this time, the real struggle was man versus man. And as new seasons come, fans may start noticing the subtle changes, shifts in alliances, colder interactions, or the absence of partnerships once taken for granted. Because while gold is hard to find, trust is even harder. And once it breaks, the ground may never feel the same. But the real twist came months later, long after the season ended and everyone had gone their separate ways. When interviews started circulating online, fans noticed something unusual. Certain crew members completely avoided mentioning one another. These weren't small omissions, they were deliberate gaps, as if whole parts of the season had been erased from their memory. People who once appeared together proudly in behind-the-scenes clips suddenly acted like they'd barely worked on the same ground. It didn't take long for speculation to explode. What made things even stranger was the sudden shift in social media activity. Photos that once showed the teams collaborating were quietly removed. Comments that hinted at cooperation were deleted. And when one fan asked directly if the two crews were planning to work together again, the answer was short, cold, and more revealing than anything the show had ever aired. Probably not. For longtime viewers, it was the clearest sign yet that whatever happened behind the cameras had left a lasting mark. As the new season approached, producers faced a difficult choice. They could try to rebuild the storylines around old partnerships or lean into the new fractures that were impossible to ignore. Insiders claim the conversations got heated. Some believed airing the conflict would make the show even more compelling, while others feared it would ruin reputations and trust. In the end, they chose the safer option, but that decision only made the off-camera rumors louder. Fans wanted answers, and the silence only fueled their curiosity. Mining has always been dangerous, unpredictable, and unforgiving, but this time the real danger wasn't collapsing ground or failing machines. It was the emotional weight of a broken team. Several workers later admitted the season felt heavier than usual, not because of the conditions, but because they never knew when a small disagreement might turn into something bigger. Every shared tool, every measurement, every decision carried tension beneath the surface. And the hardest part? Knowing that none of it would ever make it into the final cut. By the time filming wrapped, the divide between the teams was complete. People packed their gear, boarded their trucks, and left without the usual end-of-season celebrations. No group photos, no shared meals. Just a quiet, uneasy departure that said more than any dramatic episode ever could. And maybe that's the part viewers will never fully grasp. Gold Rush shows you the struggle for gold, but not always the struggle between the people searching for it. Sometimes the deepest cracks form where the cameras don't look. And this time, those cracks changed everything. Not just for the crews, but for the future of the show itself.